Welcome to Politico Policy Outlook. Welcome to Politico Policy Outlook. Please take your seats. The program will begin shortly. Welcome to Politico Policy Outlook, Cybersecurity. Please welcome Editorial Director of Politico Live, Stephen Overley.
All right. Good morning, everyone, on a very busy day in Washington. Thank you for being here for Politico Policy Outlook, Cybersecurity. Today, we're going to be talking about all of the oncoming risks in the cyberspace, especially those presented by emerging technologies, quantum computing, AI, and more. So we've got a great lineup for you today of policymakers, industry representatives, and former government officials to weigh in on these problems and what to do about them. So without further ado, I will kick off our program, and thank you again for being here with us.
Please welcome Politico cybersecurity reporter, Maggie Miller.
All right, good morning. Thank you all for being here with us today, both in person and online. I want to introduce Senator Marsha Blackburn of Tennessee. Thank you for being here, Senator.
Delighted to be here. Thank you, Maggie.
Just a short intro. You are the chair of the Senate Commerce Committee's Subcommittee on Consumer Protection, Technology, and Data Privacy. And you've introduced a number of bills, which we will get into, related to quantum technology and security. So there's a very good reason why you are here today. But before we get into those issues, I have to address the elephant in the room, or the elephant in Washington, I should say, which is our, 8-hour-old government shutdown at this point. So, it's unclear the next steps, and it is the first shutdown in a couple of years. But how long do you foresee this ongoing?
I would say the shorter the better. We hope that we end this very soon. The measure before us is a clean CR. It is a continuation of existing funding levels, and this is something that our Democrat colleagues have already voted for a couple of times. And we're just saying, let's continue this. One of the good things that has happened, and I give Senator Susan Collins, as chair of Appropriations, a good bit of credit. And she and Senator Murray have worked diligently to get all appropriations bills out of the Approps Committee. And we've already passed 3 of these on the floor. We could be finishing those appropriations bills right now if we weren't haggling over a clean CR. And our goal would be to finish those so we are on an actual budget and not on a continuing resolution. And I think it is so important that we get to that budget document so that we're putting money into programs and into work that the American people have voted for, things that they want to see happen. And so we are very hopeful. We had 3 of our colleagues cross the aisle and vote last night. So the document is a bipartisan document, and we are going to continue to every day give our friends and colleagues across the aisle the opportunity to support something that they have previously voted for and get us back into regular order.
And just as a follow-up, do you have any concerns about, national security implications of a shutdown right now and what that looks like to some of our adversaries?
We always have national security concerns about what happens during a shutdown. I think it's important to realize shutdowns are expensive, and people say, well, the government closes down, surely you're saving money. But no, the employees are put on furlough, and then they're going to be coming back. They're going to get that. Paychecks went out today, they'll go out tomorrow. And so the shutdown is something that ends up costing money. And as you look at the risk, which you all are going to talk about today, and you're thinking in terms of what kind of risk there are as far as breaches and security goes, this is something that you have to realize bad actors and adversaries do not take a day off. They don't take an hour off. They don't take a minute off. And we, pardon me, we always have to be aware and watchful for what they're up to.
And that's a great segue into what we are speaking about today, quantum technology, quantum computing, and some of the security risks associated. But before I go into some of the more specifics in some of your bills, I wanted to ask, how do you view the current threat space facing the U.S. in terms of quantum computing and technology? And also, what are the opportunities presented by this?
And that, I think, is such a great way to kind of back into this topic, because as you look at the threat space and you define what this is, first of all, it is ever-changing. And as new utilizations and applications evolve, that space is going to expand. One of the things that I look at is what happens with what I call the new axis of evil, Russia, China, Iran, and North Korea, and what kind of collaboration and participation they have one with another. How are they trying to build out technologies? And then looking at where they're partnering. And you and I talked a little bit backstage about this and the concern over what happens. You look at Iran working with Russia and the drones and the work that is being done there. You look at hypersonics and what they're doing in North Korea. And as you said, when you look at that society, then how are they drilling down on the technology that they're using, and what type of development are they doing? What kind of experimentation are they doing? And what is the expectation of those applications? Now, those are answers that we don't know. So it is up to us to say, how do we best prepare ourselves, and how do we make certain that China is not going to lead this emerging tech space by 2049, which is their goal? And how do we reserve that? And this is one of the reasons that Senator Warner and I have a piece of legislation that deals with quantum leadership and emerging tech leadership, and bringing these standard-setting meetings and conferences into the U.S., actually putting in place some funds that would help to move those here. We think that the standards and keeping our leadership on these standards is vitally important.
And that's a great way to tee up some questions around some of those pieces of legislation that you have introduced this year, along with colleagues such as Senator Warner. One of them I want to drill into, the Defense Quantum Acceleration Act, is really focused on the Pentagon and trying to ensure they take steps to focus their research on quantum computing. So what's the latest on advancing this bill, and what gaps do you see in the Pentagon's approach?
Right. This is something that Senator Hassan and I have worked on together. Here's the reason that we are doing this. The Pentagon, pardon me, I am so sorry.
If you would like some water.
Oh, wonderful. Yeah. Thank you.
But it is certainly a topic that is top of mind right now, I know, for you.
Pardon me, yes. The Pentagon has several different projects that are going on. But as we regularly see in federal agencies, you do not have a principal advisor. You do not have a center of excellence. And so this legislation would bring in place more or less a hub where you would have that principal advisor that would be able to look for commonalities and be able to say, we have innovation over here on something, and over here there are some commonalities that these researchers, as they're going through R&D, would be looking for. Having that center of excellence helps you properly seat that into a test bed and into commercialization and into application. Now, there is a program that Senator Rosen and I did called the Pathfinder program that puts our warfighter right in touch with a researcher, an engineer at one of our research institutions and universities. That has been very successful in solving some of the problems of the warfighter. If you replicate that through the Quantum Defense Initiative, then you have that principal advisor, you have that center of excellence where everybody is working within this universe to say, as we look at Space Force, as we look at hypersonics, as we look at materials development that are necessary for Space Force, then where do we benefit from one another's work?
Another piece of legislation you've introduced this year, the National Quantum Cybersecurity Migration Strategy Act, quite long, would require the White House to create a national strategy on quantum computing. This is something the White House has actually reportedly been doing since this summer. And I wanted to ask you, if you, one, have been consulted or your office for any input, and regardless, what you're hoping to see in the strategies and in that.
Yes, and Senator Lujan and I are hard at work on this, and I will say this, OSTP, Michael Kratsios is doing a tremendous job. David Sachs is doing a tremendous job. And of course, during President Trump's first term, he started the National Quantum Initiative. So when you have someone who is forward-thinking, like Kratsios and Sachs, it is very helpful. Now, with the migration strategy, what we are pushing there is for federal agencies to actually migrate to a quantum platform. And there is a mandate that each agency has to move at least one of their information systems, one of their risk systems to a quantum platform by January 1, 2027. So this moves forward that migration. And you look at agencies like the IRS, where security and privacy is so vitally important. You look at DOD and some of the cyber implications. And you say, okay, this makes sense. So what we are trying to do is push them to move forward and not say, well, we'll get around to that later. One of the things we know the federal government does not push forward with innovation at the pace that the private sector does. So this will push the federal government to find those public-private partnerships and be able to push forward with some of this work.
And regarding the strategies the White House is reportedly working on, do you feel the White House is doing enough to address the issues with quantum technology, quantum computing? And is there a timeline you've heard about these strategies coming out?
I don't think there's a set timeline. I think that when Michael Kratsios spoke to that World Quantum Symposium and talking about developing the workforce, finding ways for R&D, pushing these concepts to commercialization, having the right securities in place so that you have that robust research. That, I feel, is more of the definition of how the White House sees this is moving forward. And of course, there are going to be some components that move forward faster than others, but engagement on solving these issues is going to be important. The good thing is they're focused on it and they have a framework that they're working toward, and they have some outcomes that they want to put those provisions in place. So they say, okay, this is how we do it.
Yeah. And I want to drill in a little bit more on China specifically.
Sure.
Of course, there's been, especially the last few years, a lot of concerns around China generally. Many officials have described it as the pacing threat, but specifically on the idea that China might beat us in the quantum computing race. Can you talk about what it would mean for national security if China were to beat us to quantum computing?
Absolutely. And we just have to be so mindful of this. And one of the things that pushes this forward when you talk about quantum computing, and of course, quantum rails are where much of your AI and those applications are going to work from. And then you think about Q-Day, when the computers can break this encryption and how dangerous that would be. Now, for my home state of Tennessee, of course, we have Oak Ridge National Lab. We have the world's fastest supercomputer at Oak Ridge National Labs. It's the Frontier. And we have scientists that every single day are focused on how you integrate some of these applications with supercomputing in order to solve complex problems. And the defense mechanisms and how we protect these networks, how we enhance the encryption, and how we come up with a system where you're not going to be able to break that encryption. No one wants all of the data that we would hold to be subject to that type of encryption and having it falling into the wrong hands. So that is, when you look at China and you look at their goal and look at the amount of money that they are putting into this, one thing I do think is important, China is more concerned about speed. And then they're less concerned about resilience in a network. They have built into so many of their systems the ability to surveil and to breach privacy. So it is a warning to us that, yes, indeed, as we look at quantum and how we're going to utilize that, as we look at deployment of AI, we have to do a federal privacy standard and we have to do a breach notification standard.
Yes, and I know those have been efforts ongoing.
Listen, Peter Welch and I talk Senator Welch and I talk a good bit about this, because 13 years ago, we started trying to pass a national privacy standard.
And I've been covering the cybersecurity space for 8 years.
Right, yeah.
During that time. I want to zoom out a little bit more on just Chinese technology in general. I know you've been outspoken about the dangers of certain companies like TikTok and Huawei. How can we make sure the U.S. stays ahead of this threat in private sector as well as government sectors?
And one of the things we need to do, I think, is to pass legislation that is going to be a federal standard. And as you're talking about, Congress just seems incapable of...
Your words, not mine.
of passing federally preemptive language, whether it's the Kids Online Safety Act or a national privacy standard, or we have a piece of legislation now on AI, no fakes. And this is something Chris Coons and I have been working on, and Klobuchar and Tillis are working with us on it. And it would protect name, image, likeness of entertainers and individuals. And the fact that we have not passed these provisions is something that causes concern to so many people who are innovators. And they want to make certain that they're going to be able to do that R&D and move to commercialization, but there's also going to be guardrails in place, and they're going to have one federal standard and not 50 different state standards. But until we pass that, it is the states that are standing in the gap to protect a lot of this research work that's being done.
And again, kind of more zoomed out on Chinese tech companies, wanted to get your take on these recent comments by NVIDIA CEO Jensen Huang, who last week said being a China hawk is a, quote, badge of shame and, quote, not patriotic. What do you make of these comments from a leading executive on this issue?
You know, what we want to do is protect the environment here in the U.S., encourage innovation. This is why restarting the National Quantum Initiative is so vitally important, and I'm working in a bipartisan way at Commerce in order to do that, and have really built support for that as chair of Privacy, Technology, and the Law over at the Judiciary Committee. But making certain that with our National Quantum Initiative, that we are working on a quantum sandbox that Lujan and I, Senator Lujan and I, are working on, so that you've got those test beds for near-term technologies, making certain that we are putting in place those protections. We want these innovators to be innovating here, to be deploying here, and to be working off of standards that we help to set. There is so much that is taking place in the emerging tech space and the computational sciences. And I will say this, I think this is one of the reasons that as we look at STEM education, as we look at K-12 education and introducing these concepts to students, as we look at training in our vocational schools and our four-year universities, the integration of these technologies and these pathways into every single sector of our nation's economy and of our nation's study is going to be such an imperative.
Absolutely. Well, I want to thank you so much for your time, Senator, and hope you have a great day up on the Hill amid this shutdown.
We are going to have a great day. We're going to continue working on good things. And as I say, I'm always ready to have a conversation with anyone that wants to make the lives of Tennesseans and all Americans better. And we hope today we'll see some good conversations. Thank you all so much.
Thank you.
What a pleasure.
Thank you so much.
Thank you.
Please welcome Politico Executive Vice President and General Manager, Professional Business, Rachel Leffler, and Sci4 Data Labs CEO and co-founder Lance Smith.
Good morning, everyone. My name is Rachel Leffler, as you just heard, and I run the professional business at Politico. And we're so pleased to have you here with us today and to the many people who are on the live stream. So today, I'm delighted to sit down with Lance Smith, co-founder and CEO of Cypher Data Labs, to discuss a critical shift in cybersecurity, moving beyond fighting fires to real prevention, especially as AI and quantum threats accelerate. So Lance, we are delighted to have you with us.
Thanks for having me.
Of course. Let's dive right in because we've got a lot to cover.
All right.
Quantum computers are often called an existential threat to data security. But as Cypher Data Labs, you've developed a way to keep data safe even in a world where this computing exists. We talked about this yesterday. Yep. What does that mean in practice? How has Cypher Data Labs made data quantum proof, and why does it matter, especially now?
All right, let's take the first part of the question, and this is really important. Data loss today is at an incredibly high rate. When you see the attacks that are occurring, data breaches at a very high rate, and the loss of that personal sensitive data is because of loss of credentials, AI accelerated tools where people are getting tricked into signing into fake websites. This type of loss of data is kind of our concern. And when we looked at it, we said, well, look, could we protect the data itself? If we're faced with quantum computers that are having the ability, as Senator Marsha Blackburn was speaking about, was that could they break into these sort of secure communications and grab that data? Could we, if you had no security at all, if the perimeter security is failing because there's unknown vulnerability, could you still protect the data? So we took an approach, and we had to actually look back at American innovation. So the kind of approach that we've taken has already been well defined for us. The question was, could we commercialize it? Could we bring it to market in such a way that is transparent, but it can solve these problems? So if we look back, literally back to like 1882, this is interesting. The first time someone would take an approach where they would use a code book, sort of like a spy versus spy idea where, like in the Cold War, they had this approach where they had a pad of values that they would use to encrypt their secret messages, and they had to send it off. When they were done, they tore that page off and then got rid of it. Well, this is the kind of approach they were looking at. And when we looked at what was being done back then, it was, could you protect telegraphs? So a bank president in Sacramento, California said, I think I could do that. He created the first sort of code book. Well, about 40 years later or so, by 1917, the AT&T came up with an idea when teletypes were very popular. So Gilbert Vernon, I think, is the inventor. He came up with this idea that was called one-time pad. And that got patented, and we're like, okay, could that be useful? Well, the thing that was a kicker for us in like 1945, Shannon was a mathematician, and he sat down and said, okay, let's take this one-time pad idea. And if we use some type of key, sort of once on a piece of data, right? So this is deceptively simple. Could it be the perfect secrecy? Could you protect the data under all circumstances? And he proved back in 1945 this was possible. So this is our approach. Now, why is it important? Because with quantum computers now getting powerful enough, right, as we were talking about the last session, at a point in time when they're commercially available, they're available to cyber criminals, nation states, could they break into these secure communications, right? It's a type of algorithm that's used when you're connecting two computers together, or a person's online doing like e-commerce or logging into their bank account, online with their bank. Could you protect that level of communication? And that's where NIST has come about, coming up with new algorithms. But here's the thing, when it rolls out, we have this 4 to 5 year gap for when Q day actually occurs, that this data is still vulnerable. So if someone will break into those secure communications, well, then could we still protect the data? And this is our approach.
It's fascinating, and I love that you look back in history for the innovation to bring it forward today. So to your point, researchers are already demonstrating ways to break the strongest encryption that governments rely on a scenario which you referenced called Q day.
Yep.
How are you approaching this threat and how urgent is it? I mean, you did speak a little bit about this, but maybe take it a step further.
Yeah, there's actually two parts to this that we should at least bring to bear here. The first part is quantum computers becoming strong enough. We'll address that in a second. The second one is, how do you break these codes? That's the thing. How do you take these encrypted streams with the algorithms that are specifically being used for secure communications? Well, back in 1994, a mathematician came up with an approach, an algorithm that says, if you have quantum computers, could I come up with a way to break these codes, to factor them such that I could, in short order, in seconds, in minutes, break these codes, and now all communications could be opened up. Shor's algorithm was the result. Peter Shor created this at MIT, and it's a scary thought. Now let's look at quantum computers. See if we can intercept the trajectory as to when we could actually break these things. People are working hard at it. I love the innovation, right? There's a good side of the innovation, and then, okay, there's a negative side of this innovation. I think it was Lockheed that first came out, essentially in the mid-2010s, that said, okay, could we break these algorithms? And they did. They got to the point where they could do a 13-bit key breakage. Only like 4 or 5 years later, then Purdue University came out, and they broke 20 bits. All right, last year, Shanghai University made big noise. They broke it at 50 bits. Now, I just need to make everyone understand, we have 2,048 bits that's protecting that data that's being, it's in flight, it's protecting communications. Well, unfortunately, earlier this year, they got to 90 bits. Now, there was a lot of optimizations occurring. That actually happened on publicly available, licensable quantum computer, okay? And the fear was, as soon as we exceeded 80 bits, okay, that was a trajectory that was a little scary. So I looked at this data. So my background is in microprocessors and in integrated chips. So there's a lot that we have that when you're building these integrated circuits, how fast could you do that? It's Moore's law. So the amount of transistors that we could put on a single integrated circuit would double every 2 years. So how fast could we break 2,048 bits over the next few years? So I said, well, looking at that trajectory, it looks like it would double every 18 months. That puts us right around this 2029, 2030 time frame. And that's what's so concerning. And that's that gap we're worried about. In the meantime, NIST has done a fantastic job. Back in 2016, they started this effort. You heard PQC today. These are algorithms for post-quantum computing that says, can we protect these communication, secure communications between machines? Yes, but the infrastructure's got to build that out. We have the algorithms now. They got finalized last year. Libraries are being built. They got to get integrated into software and into hardware machines. It's going to take a few more years trying to intercept this 2030 time frame. What do we do until then? That's where we come in. If we could protect that data now at the data layer, the data itself, not the infrastructure, not what it takes to log in and try to prevent someone from getting your credentials, then if the networks are wide open, the most important, valuable piece of information that an enterprise has is that sensitive information, personal information, health information. Could we protect just that? So if they steal it, all they get is encrypted data.
That was the fascinating part you mentioned yesterday. It's always encrypted at the field level. Very interesting. Okay, so global spending on cybersecurity has nearly tripled over the past decade. Yet data breaches are more frequent and costly than ever. So what explains this disconnect and why are current defenses ineffective?
Okay, let's talk about those numbers real quick. It's about $200 billion that are being spent this year alone globally on cybersecurity. By 2030, that's going to be $500 billion. But this is what's really crazy. If you look at cybercrime as a function of GDP, this year, globally, it'll be $10 trillion in size. That's third behind the United States and China. We're going to compete with $200 billion worth of cybersecurity against that. we have a big problem. And why is it, constantly open up? Data breaches are at, again, record-setting paces. It's insane. You look at a graph, it's a trajectory, it's a hockey stick, where there's more data breaches that are occurring, some 60-some a week, that are publicly disclosed, because in the United States, for a public company, you've got to show those breaches. Senator Blackburn talked about it earlier, right? That we got to make sure that people understand, you've got to tell us whether you've been breached or not. What's the problem here is the number of variables that are hitting public sector, enterprise and private sector. These variables are how they're attacking. One of the things that tracks almost perfectly with data breaches is what we refer to in the industry as common vulnerabilities and exposures. This is a list of what people find that are unknown vulnerabilities of software stacks, hardware. You'll hear all the time that there is some type of unknown vulnerability that just got disclosed. It's a zero-day attack. Nobody knew about it. Everything's wide open. Data gets stolen. Now, this is the interesting part. There's 40,000 last year. There's been about 300,000 reported to date over the last decade or so. That's 775 a week. This is the big challenge. So if you got 775 of those occurring, you've got to go see if that hardware or software is in your enterprise. Go patch it and fix it. Now, that takes time. Someone figures it out. Then the OEM who created the product's got to create a solution, then roll it out, and then now you're exposed for 90 days, okay? Insider is the other big one, an insider attack. The good employee that turns bad, or the good employee that lost their credentials. How do you detect that in real time? Right now, it's, I think, average about 200 days to determine whether you've been penetrated in your network. 200 days, you can pull an entire database worth of information out. Now, you mentioned earlier, at the field level. This is what we're interested in. If every field of a record, first name, last name, social security, driver's license number, if each one of those had their own encryption key, then we could protect each one of those individual fields. And this is the approach that we've taken, and this is what one-time PAT is about. And that when those records get stolen, they become unbreakable, right?
It's fascinating. So quantum computers are quickly moving from theory to reality. I know this is your specialty, with universities already demonstrating they can break RSA encryption in seconds. So how real is that risk, and what would it mean if governments and businesses aren't prepared? What does that look like?
Yeah. If we take a look at the quantum computers themselves, there is a race, right? So with Shor's algorithm that we talked about before, there's early days there was a requirement, or at least a minimum requirement for performance and stability. Generating, using quantum physics, a stable, what they call a qubit, right? It's like a register bit for a classic computer. To have that be stable for a long period of time is one of the challenges. You'll hear them, in the industry and the experts talk about error correction and trying to get these qubits to stay around for a long time so they can get their computational work done. There's been a trajectory on that that's been very fast. Even over this weekend, I was surprised to see, I think it was a Sunday, I read the article, Harvard University announced something very interesting. They could take a qubit and they can make it stable for 2 hours. Now that doesn't sound like a long time, but less than 3 years ago, IBM on their Eagle computer, one of the early quantum computers, it was 400 milliseconds, less than half a second. So now it's become more stable, they can do more qubits, but this is very interesting. Shor's algorithm, initially the folks felt that you need 20 million qubits to make a stable machine, to make it capable to break these algorithms, okay? Well, in the last year, Shor's algorithm got optimized. They took that requirement from 20 million qubits down to 1 million. And that's what we're really worried about. So now we got this trajectory to be able to break it. Quantum computers are actually getting better and faster. So is it in 2030 that there seems to be about a 20% chance that nation states will now have the capability of breaking it, or will it be sooner? This gap is what we're really worried about. We're worried about anyone getting the data, but now we have to have coverage there and take this deceptively simple approach, which there is a definition that says 3 rules. You need to have a key that's sufficiently random. You have to have a key that's the same length as the data you're trying to protect. Remember, we go down to even a word, in a single field, and then you only use it on that one piece of data. Those 3 rules, if you can commercialize that, scalable, performant, transparent, works on any existing system, you've got the recipe of success when that gap is, which is here today. The concept is harvest today, right? Decrypt down the road. And we already know that nation states have been infiltrating our networks, and they're collecting data. They're collecting these streams of connected, encrypted, secure communications, and they grab it, and then down the road, a couple of years from now, they're going to decrypt that, and they're going to get the data that's in there.
Yeah, the harvest today and decrypt tomorrow is a really compelling sort of soundbite that I learned from you. So artificial intelligence is already making cyber attacks faster and more sophisticated. How is this shifting the threat landscape in the near term?
Yeah, very quickly. AI is a double-edged sword, okay? It's helping the good guys. That gives them the ability to go and look at their networks to see if someone's infiltrated, look for abnormal activity. And that's been helpful. Over last year, it took an average of 300 days to see if someone's been in their network, right? Almost a year. Like another 75 days to figure out if something was stolen. Then AI came about, and they could analyze petabytes of traffic, and they reduced about 100 days, okay? That's great news. Well, the bad news is that when you take these AI accelerated tools and give it to the cyber criminals, now instead of taking hours to create that phishing email, they do it in seconds, and they send a lot of them, right? It's all about just volume and velocity that we're sort of getting hit with. It's even, you take AI and use these common vulnerabilities, which is literally a recipe of how do I penetrate an organization? They apply that, and now they're coming after you. This is go back to this point that says, if the networks are wide open, if you have no type of defensive security, could you still protect the data?
Mm-hmm. Well, we're going to close with the last question and sort of bring it full circle to the whole talking about policy. Looking ahead, what should policymakers prioritize most urgently when it comes to making sure the U.S. is ready for this new era of cyber threats?
The legislation that Senator Blackburn talked about is incredibly important. We need legislation, quite frankly, to protect our future generations. We need to stop the loss of this sensitive information. It pains us to look at who the victims are and ensuring that we can protect those who can't protect themselves. If we can protect that data, then we don't have to worry about the kids, the K through 12. This is the thing that's scary. Could you imagine if you were like 8, 9 years old, sitting down and you say, hey, Mom, let's get on and take a look at my credit to make sure that no one's actually opened up a credit card in my name, or someone's taken my Social Security and started to use those benefits long before they even get into the workforce. These are the things that worry us, and we can't forget about the seniors, right, and the veterans. These are the ones we have to go and help and protect now. Going after and taking data security and frameworks for protecting data. We got approaches for protecting data at rest, in motion, right? With PQC coming out, we've got that covered. Now it's this idea of protecting data in use, so that when somebody uses that information, are we controlling who has access to it, even when it leaves, the systems, the databases? That's what we're trying to get closure on.
Lance, we could talk for hours. Thank you so much for your time and your expertise and for your partnership with Cypher Data Labs. This has been fantastic.
Thank you so much.
Thank you. I'm going to grab my wallet.
Please welcome Politico cybersecurity reporter Dana Nickel.
Hi, everyone. Thank you so much for being here today. With the current wave of artificial intelligence and coming wave of quantum computing, the vulnerabilities in our current defense systems will only grow. We just heard from Senator Blackburn outline the national priorities when it comes to emerging technologies and their impact on cybersecurity. I'm delighted to keep that conversation going with an expert panel to break down the challenges ahead and how the U.S. should respond. Please join me in welcoming Kemba Walden, President of Paladin Global Institute and the former acting National Cyber Director under President Biden. Next, we have Gretchen Campbell, Associate Vice President for Quantum Research and Education at the University of Maryland. Gretchen also previously led the National Quantum Coordination Office. And lastly, we're joined by Emily Harding, the Director of the Intelligence, National Security, and Technology Program at the Center for Strategic and International Studies. It's great to have you all here with me today. Jumping right in, we've heard a lot of talk about post-quantum cryptography being the most important topic in cyber within the next decade. Kemba, what should industry be doing now to prepare for it?
Well, first, thank you for having me, and congratulations on your first panel here.
Thank you.
So I think, first of all, I think we're really looking at a time horizon of 3 to 5 years, not 10 years. What the government is doing and should be doing is causing all federal departments and agencies to take an inventory, a full inventory of their cryptographic systems and prioritize them in ordinance of high-value assets or whatever it is, in order to be able to start to do the migration into the new post-cryptographic algorithm. They also need to be migrating to TLS 1.3, which is the newest protocol that closes a lot of the vulnerabilities that could be subject to exploitation. But I think we are here, and we started that process maybe a little too late, frankly, but we started it a few years ago, and we need to keep driving that process. So that would be the first thing that I think federal departments and agencies and industry, by the way, should be doing.
Absolutely. Gretchen, we've seen that NIST has been working on guidance and tools for years and rolled out 3 post-quantum encryption standards last year. Can you break down these measures and how widely they're being adopted?
Great. First, also, thank you for inviting me today. I'm so happy to be here. So first let me say that I'm a quantum expert, not a cybersecurity expert. And as I always like to say, while quantum is in the word post-quantum cryptography, it's very much a classical solution. So I'm sorry, my NIST colleagues could not be here to talk a little bit more about this. But as you said, this is something that NIST has been working on for many years now, is to come up with these new standards so that we are very much ready for, the threat of a future quantum computer. And the nice thing about post-quantum cryptography is that given that it is a classical solution, it's something that companies and the government and industry can start to implement immediately. So essentially using existing infrastructure, using everything that we have already set up, things like your web browser, and browsers like Edge and Chrome are already able to encrypt using PQC. So some things, what we do on the internet, our devices that communicate, we're able to implement this very quickly. The challenge will be, upgrading devices. So I think some things can be upgraded very quickly, but as Kemba said, we need agencies to be going through, doing an inventory beyond updating our digital structure. How do we actually long-term go and update everything else that will need to have upgrades so that it can support these new standards?
Absolutely. Legacy systems often can be hard to update, and you mentioned that this could be a challenge, Gretchen. Emily, what sort of security gaps do you anticipate when the federal government is updating these systems to include post-quantum?
Not to be flippant, but big ones. I think this is one of those issues that we see so often in this field and many other fields, frankly, where the threat is real and it is out there, but it is still theoretical, and people haven't really wrapped their heads around how close it could be. I think Kemba's right, that 3 to 5 years is actually a reasonable time horizon to focus on. Folks who have been looking at quantum decrypt for a long time have been saying it's 10 years out, it's 10 years out, and this time they're saying, no, really, it's actually 10 years out. And I think the government has been continually kicking this can down the road. So we will do a few things to try to secure the most sensitive assets, but it's thinking more broadly about what else our adversaries might go after and what else we actually need to secure. It's no longer true that they only want to steal, NSA's deepest, darkest secrets. They also want to be able to disrupt the way that the United States operates as an economy, and that's a much broader attack surface. So we need to keep the drumbeat of urgency going, even though it feels like a theoretical threat that's sort of out there in the future somewhere.
Absolutely. You all touched on really interesting points, especially that this timeline is accelerated, quantum is here. And during Senator Blackburn's conversation with Maggie a few minutes ago, she warned that in the quantum or AI race, adversaries like China are working incredibly quickly to try to outpace US innovation. What are some of the national security risks of China beating the US in developing this tech? Kemba, do you want to start us off?
Sure. You've heard, I'm sure, in the last two presentations, the harvest now, decrypt later strategy. And so we can see that as a real threat. AI has the capability of learning, and quantum has the capability of supercharging AI. And so the two work in tandem, and whoever gets there first is going to be able to have what some will call quantum supremacy. But they've harvested a lot of data, and Emily's right. It's not just the deepest, darkest secrets that sit in three-letter agencies. It's health data, it's private data, citizen data. It's the ability to decrypt identities once we have a proper identity system in our digital ecosystem. It's the ability to decrypt sort of our web browser, the things that we rely on every day, decrypt data that exists in schools, et cetera. So it's a challenge, it's a race for sure, and it's a race with the formidable competition, right, in China and other countries around the world that are focused in this space. And you heard the last presenter say, we are focused on some of the right things, the cybersecurity risks, but we also need to supercharge innovation because others are.
Absolutely. Emily, any thoughts?
This is one of those weird circumstances where, in part, the race is already lost because of the harvest now, decrypt later problem. We know that China and other adversaries have been soaking up tons and tons of data with the understanding that someday they're going to have this capability, and so they're going to know what's in that data. There's no getting it back. The real question is, what's going to be useful in what they've already collected, and what can we protect from here forward? The secrecy of this advance is going to be really interesting. If China manages to figure out how to do quantum decryption first and manages to keep it a secret, and we're just kind of blindly walking along and continuing to encrypt things, thinking that it's secure even if it's not, that's a huge advantage. If our intelligence community manages to figure out exactly the moment when they do that quantum decrypt, then it's going to be a 5-alarm fire here in DC to try to actually get everything locked down to the extent that we can. And I think the opposite is probably true from Beijing's perspective. So I think there's an interesting sort of tension there between sharing what kinds of forward progress we're making and also keeping the advantage a secret. But either side is going to have at least a temporary huge advantage.
Absolutely. And shifting towards how the government has been preparing and responding, much of the Biden administration's policies on post-quantum encryption were implemented within the final months of his presidency. Gretchen, you were there towards the end of the administration and for a first few months of the Trump administration. Where would you say things left off with quantum cryptography?
Yeah, so I think, as we heard earlier, NIST has been working on this for much longer, right? Started this process in 2016 to develop the standards. So I do think this is a problem that everybody has agreed we need to solve as quickly as possible and to continue to move forward. As you said, during the Biden administration, a number of policies came out that essentially were focused on this. As I said, I focus on quantum, but I think there was very much a push of how do we balance the economic prospects of quantum with also the future risk of quantum. And we did see a bunch of policies come out regarding PQC. Some of the inventories have started to be begun, and I think that work continues now. More or less those policies continue, and I think it's important that we continue to move towards that migration as quickly as possible. And I will say I think it's something we can all agree on, that migrating towards PQC as quickly as possible is something that I think we are going to continue to see move forward.
Absolutely. And during Senator Blackburn's conversation with Maggie, she spoke briefly about her bill that would require the White House to develop a national quantum strategy. We've seen reporting recently that the Trump White House is preparing a batch of executive orders surrounding quantum technology, but we're not yet aware of what those would look like. What policies are essential to include in the development of post-quantum encryption? Kemba, want to start us off?
Sure. Well, so a lot of Senator Blackburn's legislation, which is, in my view, thoughtful, are derived from a GAO report that was published late last year, and I think there was some reporting even in the middle, or some testimony even in the middle of this year. There's a lot there. It's all in pieces right now from legacy policymaking. There needs to be a central coordination space, and I think the going recommendation is for the National Cyber Director's Office to do that. So we hopefully will see continuation of the OMB work on inventorying what cryptographic assets we have and prioritizing the migration for PQC, but also figuring out the center of policymaking for advancing quantum innovation in order to be able to meet our adversaries where they are at this point and maybe even exceed. I don't know what the 3 executive orders are going to contain, but I am encouraged that there's going to be a centralized point of view in this National Cyber Director's Office to be able to orchestrate all the work that needs to go into getting ready for a quantum-ready sort of society.
Emily, any thoughts on what you'd like to see?
I mean, 100% agree with what Kemba is saying. Having a central location in the White House pushing this initiative forward is going to be important to actually making progress. I would just say math and money. That's what we need. We need math and we need money. The money piece is going to be a check that Congress does not want to write, but they're going to have to try to push agencies of the federal government forward on doing post-quantum encryption, trying to switch over their systems. The math piece, I cannot overstate this enough because we don't have enough scientists to fill the need. You look at quantum programs in various universities, they're half full. They think they're going to have only 50% of the slots in the next 10 to 20 years actually full of people who are qualified to do this sort of work. It's hard work, but really fun work. I would encourage anybody who's considering sending a kid to college right now, have them look into quantum computing because there is going to be growth field out there for anybody looking for a job in the next while. And then Congress can support that too. So math and money.
Absolutely. Gretchen, you're currently in this space at the University of Maryland. How would you respond to Emily's recommendation?
Yeah, to start with, I'll say as a quantum scientist, I 100% agree. I think it's a great career choice, so please. So no, I mean, I think this is a real issue, right? We've already seen that we don't have the workforce we need for quantum. And I think it's incredibly important that we not only grow the workforce, but we grow the domestic workforce. And the other thing is, again, I'm a physicist, so I think that a physicist is great for everything, but as the field grows, we need mathematicians, right? We need computer scientists, we need engineers. So not only do we need to grow the number of folks that we are training to go into the quantum workforce, we need to increase the types of people that we are attracting to the quantum workforce. So I agree. And this is why the university, has someone like me, right? So we can look, across different programs and figure out how do we make sure the engineers know a little bit about quantum? How do we make sure the computer scientists know about quantum? So that we're really bringing up the people with all of the types of skills we are going to need to not only do the theory, but actually, figure out the hardware that keeps us safe.
I love this so much. The second only to ACC sports rivalries is rivalries among scientists as to which one is the purest science.
It's true.
And the most core to the discipline. I love it.
Absolutely. And zooming in a little bit, Emily, do all of these policy measures and efforts to prioritize cyber, will that come at the expense of innovation as we're sort of rushing to embrace quantum?
Let's not. Let's not have it come at the expense of each other. I do think there's a holistic way to go after this problem set. And I think curiosity is going to be core to that holistic way, not saying, well, this is the answer, this is the silver bullet. not taking just the one presentation that somebody in the government got, this will solve all your problems, but looking at it as a whole bunch of different pieces of the same challenge. And that challenge is great power competition. That challenge is trying to secure an increasingly complex and interconnected global picture. Just the other day, for example, the cyber attack we saw at Heathrow, right? It was a one system that was attacked, and it had global implications. And that kind of thing is only going to be amplified by this intersection of cyber and quantum and AI and the way that we just live our lives on a daily basis now. So I don't think we have to sacrifice one area in order to make really interesting advancements and innovations in others. I think they can go hand in hand. And I'm really encouraged to see the conversation now focused on secure by design in a lot of different fields. I think that was a great initiative that the Biden administration pushed forward, and then we see the Trump administration embracing. So we need to keep walking down that path.
Kemba, I saw you shake your head a little bit at my question. I'd love to hear your thoughts here as well.
Yeah, I think they have to go together in order to supercharge innovation. You can't have one and not the other. They're not going to get in the way of each other. I think you have to have cybersecurity in order to supercharge AI and quantum. It's just secure by design is one of those initiatives that started that process. Building the AI tech stack or understanding the AI tech stack from its roots and figuring out what we need to design in while we're designing now in order to make sure that it is safe and secure to be able to go. Quantum is going to supercharge AI in a way that I think is going to be beneficial for society, but we need to also look at our systems, our digital systems, and figure out which is going to be safe. How do we do that in a secure way so that we can innovate and move forward? Looking at our resources, and I think people, I want to jump in on this one, but people are a significant resource here. People are very much a part of this trifecta of digital infrastructure, AI, and quantum. And not only do we need more people in the sciences, but we need to start thinking about what we do in K-12 space. Like what are the foundational pieces that we're teaching in order to be able to get to be a quantum scientist or a physicist or an engineer, whatever it is, or a policymaker that's not afraid of science. But we need all of it, and we need all of it now in order to prepare for what is foreseeable, in my point of view, in the next 3 to 5 years. So there is a bit of urgency here, and I'm really delighted to see that there is a bit of urgency that picked up in the Biden administration towards its end, and that is being embraced by the Trump administration now. I think we're in a good place, and we just need to keep moving forward.
Absolutely. And the three of you all touched on the importance of really training and bringing up scientists in this space. You mentioned that sort of going back to the K through 12 level would be a great place to start. What sort of policies would you implement to foster this talent and interest at a young age?
I think we need to incentivize the process. So as you may be aware, states are really in charge of curriculum development with incentives and resources from the federal government where appropriate. And so we need to start thinking in terms of, computational math and all the things that I was helping my children with figuring out cell structure and atoms and nucleus. And I was just like, oh, this is actually going to be helpful to you in the future. But it's reimagining what foundational skills our kids need and implementing. And we need to do that in deep partnership with the states, with the state and local departments of education, with funding structures, with how do we classify sciences? Is computer engineering a science? Is it, what is it? What are the math that's required in order to be able to fill the pipeline into the universities, into the research space? We need to think about that. And then we also need to figure out what lifelong learning looks like across all disciplines in order to be able to embrace what is foreseeable. I don't know that we've given enough time and attention to that piece of it, and what incentives do we need to put in place in order to encourage that? What is industry doing in order to encourage lifelong learning for those of us that are in this space? But all of that is necessary. So not just the technology, not just the secure by design in that technology, in the AI tech stack, and in quantum sciences, but the people resources pieces of it.
Absolutely. Gretchen, your thoughts here?
Sure. Yeah, no, I think this is really important and something, we've made a little bit of progress on in the last few years. Actually, during the first Trump administration, OSTP and NSF launched the Q12 consortia, which essentially is a group of stakeholders actually working to increase essentially quantum awareness and education at earlier levels. NSF has continued to fund that. It continues to go strong and actually has successfully added quantum to the curricula in a few states. But as you said, right, it's hard. States make all these decisions differently. So I think we're making progress there, but it's incredibly important that we not only increase public awareness of quantum. As somebody who does quantum, I don't think I heard the word for the first time until I was already at college, right, thinking about physics. We've made some progress there. We have quantum in movies. We hear about it much more in the news. But I think we need to figure out how do we teach the skills we need. We also need to teach parents that this is a good career choice. As much as you need to teach kids, you need their parents to understand that this is a field that if you go into, you're going to have a great job. So I think it's important that we continue to do that work, continue to figure out how do we give all of the skills you need to go into these types of careers and make people realize, and also that you don't necessarily need a PhD. When you actually look at the jobs available in quantum industry today, many of them you don't necessarily need to do quantum, but I think people are often still scared away by the word quantum. So making sure people realize that there's a wide variety of opportunities available and making sure we're bringing in as many people as we can.
Absolutely. Emily?
I would say lean into the cool factor and away from the intimidation piece. Yeah, it's not scary. So cool. It's so cool. I didn't learn about, I'm a foreign affairs major, right? So I didn't learn about quantum computing and all of the intricacies of it until I was in the workforce. And it was one of those things where once you start thinking about it, it's really hard to stop thinking about it because the implications are so vast. And just the cool factor of the idea of one thing sitting on one side of the planet and another thing sitting on the other side of a planet, and they're entangled so they talk to each other. I mean, wrap your head around that. That's so cool. And you can spark imagination in kids with stories and ideas like that that make them excited about the possibility of learning the science and digging into the math and doing the engineering. And the sort of cool factor will carry them through, as much as quantum Ant-Man movies were not exactly a documentary. At least it sort of got it out into the zeitgeist. The other thing that I would say I think is a real missed opportunity is that we should be putting these kind of advanced programs in schools that surround military bases. And the reason that I say that is because military service and government service runs in families. So if you have a parent or a grandparent who's in the military, you're much more likely to join the military yourself. These are the people who we're going to need to be able to understand these things and work with them in the future. So if we put charter schools or magnet schools or advanced internship programs around military bases, you're going to be likely to get high school kids who are committed to public service, strong patriots, and then also have the sparked interest in math and science. And that's going to build a workforce that's going to be really helpful in the next 10, 20, 30, 40 years?
Well, from a journalism major to a foreign affairs major, I did also learn about quantum pretty late into my workforce years, so I feel very seen. And pivoting a little bit, we've talked a lot about quantum being the biggest advancement here within the next 3 to 5 years. Currently, we're seeing the mass adoption of AI tools among the private and public sectors. And at the same time, I've reported extensively on how hackers are able to weaponize AI to spread disinformation or even deploy malware. What are some of the risks of hackers utilizing AI tools in this way? Kemba, do you want to start us off?
Sure. I would posit to say that right now, the attackers are leveraging AI more than the defenders. The defenders are doing a great job, but you're seeing a lot of low-level tooling in AI. And that's from, sort of finding exploitation in the AI tech stack, but also using AI as a tool to go after the data and the systems that you're looking to go after. I think quantum's going to supercharge all of that. We haven't yet seen AI exploit a 0-day in massive amounts. There's still traditional exploitation happening that's quite productive. But we've seen AI in the ways that you've described it, in these sort of low-level, let's do a better phishing email or do more phishing sprays or password sprays or whatever it is. I think they're leveraging AI in a way that's a little bit more effective than defenders are leveraging it right now, and quantum's just going to supercharge all of that.
Absolutely. Emily, do you think on the other side of this, AI and quantum can be a tool for cyber defenders as well?
Yes, they have to be. This is going to be the innovation driving innovation dynamic. You're going to see, I think, some really interesting work done around defense, building off some of the models that we've seen in the financial services industry, where you can detect anomalies very quickly. And then quantum, I mean, at its core, it really is just another way to process information very quickly. And so that piece of it is going to work well, I think, eventually with AI systems to do things like protection. The cat and mouse game, though, between the attackers and the defenders with these tools is going to be really interesting to watch. I would be highly entertained if it weren't for the immense consequences surrounding it. But it's going to be a real field for people who have wicked creativity to do some really good work.
Absolutely. And have you seen any instances where defenders have been really creative and thwarted attacks that have been supercharged by AI?
I think we're starting to see some of that. I really do look to the financial services industry. If you talk to folks who do things like credit card security or insurance fraud, right, like they have figured out how to use these tools not only to identify strange cyber activity, but also to identify just strange human activity. And the better these tools get at anomaly detection, the more they can be transferred out into other fields. So training them to say what actually is weird, and then you can kind of deploy that across different applications, I think is going to be the way to go.
Absolutely. And Gretchen, we've heard a lot of talk today about how AI and quantum are sort of supercharging each other. In your work with developing this technology, what are some of your hopes for the ways that these two technologies can play off each other?
Yeah, so I will say, excuse me. So, quantum and AI, they're both, critical emerging technologies, but, I'd like to say they're at very different places on the emerging spectrum, right? So I think for AI, it has emerged, right? Quantum, we're still much earlier on in the process for how it's going to develop. So I think there's no question that there's going to be an interplay between quantum and AI, but I will still say it's still a little bit uncertain at exactly, where are the places where quantum will play a role, and how that interplay will happen between quantum AI. So as a scientist, I think I'm still sort of looking to see as quantum develops, as we reach, sort of more capable quantum computers, exactly where that interplay happens and where quantum makes a real impact in AI. So I'd say right now, I look forward to seeing as quantum develops, where are the places that we're going to really see the interplay between quantum and AI, but then also, as someone who's thought about the security side of this, it is also important that we're making sure to prepare for, some kind of, acceleration of AI, thanks to quantum.
Absolutely. And to finish us off, as of last night, we are officially in a government shutdown, and federal cyber agencies, while often deemed essential, are operating with a reduced workforce. Kemba, would you say that in this moment, AI could be a helpful tool for cyber personnel on staff to conduct their duties and ensure that we're still secure?
I mean, theoretically it could, but one of the challenges with a government shutdown is that without appropriations or money flowing, you can't deploy tools like AI to do the work of humans. I think this is a critical time. I know that CISA has been investigating and working through the new Cisco vulnerability. I'm hoping that those employees are accepted so that they are able to continue the work that we need in this space. The challenge for me is that the adversary probably understands US civics better than a lot of people do. And they found a vulnerability in governance right now. And that is terrifying to me.
Absolutely. That's a very interesting point. Emily Kemba mentioned that the adversary is sort of understanding civics better than a lot of us are right now. What makes us sort of weak in cyberspace in this moment, sort of alongside a shutdown?
Alongside a shutdown? Well, the shutdown is actually, I think, going to have an impact. Contrary to popular opinion, there really aren't that many things the government does that are non-essential. Otherwise, they wouldn't do them. So there will be an effect from the shutdown. I think what the adversary really understands, and what we understand from a theoretical sense but haven't really wrapped our heads around, is the decentralized nature of our critical infrastructure. In so much of the rest of the world, the federal government or the central government controls what comes in and out of the country through the ones and zeros. Not here. And because we have delegated responsibility for things like water and power down to local levels, you have this patchwork of different defenses all across the country. And some of them are very good, and some of them are very weak, and our adversaries understand that. So like what we saw with Volt Typhoon is an actor taking excellent advantage of a decentralized system to try to attack across a huge surface and to really create vulnerabilities that the federal government knows about but can't really control. And solving that problem across that patchwork is going to be just a big challenge for the next few years.
Absolutely. Well, thank you all for being here, and thank you to everybody who came out to listen to this conversation.
Thank you so much. Good job.
All right. Thank you all so much for being here today. If you want to follow more of Maggie and Dana's great reporting, please subscribe to Morning Cyber, our cybersecurity newsletter, and look out for other Politico Live events. We want to thank our partner, Sci4 Data Labs, and thank you all for being here today. Enjoy the rest of your day.